Remember how last time Trump was going to build the wall, which he's going back to doing, and going to make Mexico pay for it because of the border wall between us and them? Mexico said no, and they still aren't paying for it. And the big question was, well, who's going to pay for this thing? And it looked as Trump was going to try to divert money from other programs, military programs, to emergency build this wall. I know that's a long introduction to this story, but we're looking at that again with another big initiative that's already in funding, already in place, and needs to be funded. Essentially, the administration for Donald Trump relocating funds, reallocating funds for the relocation of migrants from this nation to their original nations. Repatriation makes cost money and time and energy, so they may take money from the TSA or the Coast Guard because they're semi-connected to fund ICE to do these large-scale deportations. It's something that Donald Trump wants to happen, and it has to happen now, apparently. So if it's done, you're writing these checks. You got to pull from someplace. You pull from the other kitty to make sure it's paid off and deal with it later. ICE has constraints. ICE has constraints like every other financial institution here in the United States. They have challenges managing their budgets and the logistics getting back and forth. So all of a sudden, sending back thousands of people on military planes to be repatriated is a cost they didn't have in the budget. And so it's got to come from somewhere, somebody's budget, and it coming from other places. Now, why the TSA and the Coast Guard? The operations sort of deal with security issues, deal with going back and forth across the waters, going back and forth across the borders. So it just sort of makes sense. They're technically doing some of the work that TSA and the Coast Guard are doing so they can get some of the monies they would get to do some of that work. Now, it's not apples to apples by any means, but it is a thought process to make sure things get paid. And it's not actually not unprecedented. It's something that's happened recent years. The last administration directed, well, actually the last Trump administration directed $271 million of disaster relief to and cybersecurity initiatives to support immigration related activities. So, yeah. What it does mean is if resources are pulled away from the TSA and the Coast Guard, it's money they can't spend doing TSA and Coast Guard things, which is there. And there are legal and political challenges. The legal thing, can they pull this legally from here to here? Working in acquisitions and funding back when I was in the military back in the day, when someone gives you money to buy something, you have to buy that thing with that in a period of time or someone goes to jail. I've seen very big wigs go to jail for not following the funding issues. Trump, doesn't really matter, but somebody down the line could go to jail if they don't actually fund the right projects and don't have the right actual waivers to get around that one. And of course, it just looks bad. Taking money from one agency to give to somebody else shows favoritism and shows you may not trust the other agency, which Trump may not trust TSA, and just not good look all around. What do you think about funding for the mass deportations? The bulk of Americans, over 50% of Americans, are down with deportations and mass deportations as they are, but somebody's got to pay for it. What do you think about possibly shifting the funding from Coast Guard and TSA to the ICE agents so they can deal with more of these things? And do you think it's actually going to stick? I know we've sent 1,000 people away in one weekend, but how long before half of those folks are back across the borders? We don't know yet. It's only been a week, but we'll have a count for that. And once it comes back in place, we'll see if this is a working project or another thing that seems like a boondoggle. My words. Your thoughts, very much warranted.